It was one of those heavy, sweltering afternoons in a small village near Kolkata, where the world seems to go quiet because every adult is retreated into a deep midday nap. My cousin and I were sitting on the floor, the sharp, pungent scent of mustard oil rising from our bowls of puffed rice. Out of nowhere, she turned to me with a look of genuine, innocent confusion. "Do people in Sweden really eat cows and pigs?" she asked. I was barely 10 years old, but I felt a sudden, hot flush of shame creep up my neck. I nodded silently. Then came the follow-up that stopped me cold. "So, did they eat dogs and cats too?" To her, it was a perfectly logical progression. If you have the heart to eat one four-legged mammal, why not the rest? Looking at her, a girl who spent her energy rescuing every stray animal she found, I realized we weren't just living in different climates, we were operating on entirely different moral hard drives. In Sweden, where I was being raised, a cow was a standard food source. To her in that village, it was a living being unworthy of the plate. It left me with a haunting question that I couldn't quite shake. If I had stayed in that village instead of growing up in the quiet, individualistic suburbs of Scandinavia, would I still be me? Would my sense of humor have a different rhythm? Would my dreams and ambitions be unrecognizable to the person I am today? We often like to think of our identity as a fixed monument, an unbreakable inner self dictated by our DNA. We assume that who we are is baked into ourselves from birth. But emerging research in cross-cultural psychology suggests something far more fluid. It turns out that the very architecture of your brain, the way you perceive a physical scene, and even the way you process the concept of self, might depend entirely on the soil where you planted your roots. If you changed your geography, would you effectively become a stranger to yourself? That story it gets me every time because it hits on something so fundamental, this idea of who we are. We're so sure we're in charge.
It's the default setting for the human brain, I think, to assume that you, the conscious you, reasoned your way into your beliefs. Politics, your food choices, your morals.
Right. I believe this because I've thought about it, and it's the logical conclusion.
Exactly. We see ourselves as the authors of our own character. But the research we're going to get into today really it chips away at that assumption. It suggests that maybe we're not the author. Maybe we're just the narrator, describing a story that was written by forces we can't even see.
Okay, that's a pretty dramatic way to kick things off. Forces we can't see.
I know it sounds a bit spooky, but I'm talking about things like, well, the historical prevalence of pathogens in the region where your ancestors lived.
Germs.
Or the subtle ways your own genes are quietly pushing you to select certain friends, certain cities, certain jobs. We think we're making free choices, but a lot of the time, our biology is just looking for a comfortable place to sit.
So this is where it gets tricky for me, because when you start talking like this, it sounds a lot like biological determinism. You know, the idea that we're all just meat robots running a program and free will is an illusion.
I get the hesitation, too. And that's the big, scary monster under the bed with this whole field of research, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But I don't think that's the right way to frame it. It's not about erasing free will. It's about understanding the rules of the game we're playing. Yes. You can choose how to play a game of chess. You have free will over your moves. But you can't choose to make a pawn move like a queen. The rules constrain your choices.
Okay.
This research is just revealing the rule book, the biological and environmental constraints we're all operating under. We're going to explore, first, how something as tiny as a virus might be the invisible architect behind our social worlds.
The idea that germs created governments.
Then we'll get into how your genes are not just a passive blueprint, but almost like a heat-seeking missile, actively hunting for the right environment to express themselves.
Okay, nature hunting for nurture.
And finally, we'll look at how our highest, most sacred moral beliefs, our sense of right and wrong, might actually be built on top of a very primitive, very physical reflex.
The gag reflex, the yuck factor.
The yuck factor, exactly. How the need to avoid eating rotten meat got repurposed by evolution to create things like political affiliation and religious taboos.
That's a huge agenda. Germs, the invisible architects. This is where parasite stress theory comes in, right?
Correct. And to really understand it, I think we need to move away from the abstract theory and into a real-world example. There's this one account from a young man we'll call Eris, who grew up in a coastal village in Southeast Asia.
And the environment there is key, I'm guessing.
It's tropical. Very hot, very humid. The air is thick. It's the kind of environment where life on a microbial level just explodes.
So beautiful, but also dangerous.
Before modern sanitation and medicine, a place like that is just teeming with invisible threats. You've got malaria in the mosquitoes, cholera in the water, parasites, bacteria. The pathogen load, as scientists call it, is extremely high.
So your body is under constant siege.
Constant siege. Now, Eris, he's describing his culture, and he's not happy about it. He sees it as incredibly rigid, almost suffocating.
He uses that phrase, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down.
And it applies to everything. There are strict rituals for how you greet people, very specific, unchanging recipes for how you prepare food. You only marry people from a very small, approved circle of families.
And what really gets him is the suspicion, the intense suspicion of anyone or anything new.
Right. Outsiders are viewed with this deep, almost instinctual distrust. And Eris, who has seen tourists, who's been to the city, he sees this as a moral failure. He looks at his own family, his own village, and thinks, why are we so backward? Why are we so closed-minded?
He's judging them from a modern individualistic perspective. He sees it as a lack of imagination or maybe even a lack of intelligence.
Exactly. He thinks they've just failed to evolve intellectually. But Parasite stress theory comes along and offers a totally different explanation. It suggests that what Eris sees as a closed mind is actually a very effective, time-tested biological defense mechanism.
Get me. How does a high pathogen load lead to a culture that obsesses over conformity? What's the actual mechanism?
Let's do a thought experiment. Go back 500 years. You're living in that same village. There are no antibiotics, no vaccines. You don't know what a virus is. All you know is that people get sick and die, and you don't know why.
A terrifying way to live.
Absolutely. Now, one day, a stranger walks into your village, a trader from a region 100 miles away. What's your reaction?
Well, my modern brain says, cool, a new person, what's their story? What do they have to trade?
And that curiosity could get your entire family killed. In a high pathogen environment, that stranger is not a person. They are a container of novel pathogens. They are a biological time bomb. Their body has adapted to the germs in their home region, but they're carrying microbes your immune system has never encountered.
So if I welcome them, share a meal, shake their hand.
You could be introducing an epidemic that wipes out your whole village. So over hundreds of generations, what kind of behavior gets selected for?
Suspicion of outsiders. Xenophobia.
Exactly. What we now call xenophobia in that context wasn't just an irrational prejudice. It was a functional, adaptive quarantine protocol. It wasn't about hate. It was about survival.
Oh, okay, so that explains the outsiders. But what about the internal rigidity, the obsession with doing everything the exact same way?
It's the same logic. Why is it so vitally important that you prepare the pork using these specific 10 spices and cook it for exactly this amount of time?
Because some of those spices might be antimicrobial, and if you undercook it, you get trichinosis.
They didn't know the words antimicrobial or trichinosis. They just had a different data set. They knew that the family down the path that got creative and tried a new recipe all died horribly a week later.
While the families who stuck to the tradition survived.
Right. The individualists, the innovators, the ones who deviated from the norm, they were a danger not just to themselves, but to everyone. They were constantly running risky experiments. So the culture evolves to punish deviance and reward conformity. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down isn't just a saying, it's a public health policy.
And the group, the collective, becomes the primary unit of survival.
The whole idea of collectivism, the notion that the group's welfare and traditions are more important than any single individual's desires, it functions as a kind of collective immune system. It's a behavioral defense against disease.
That is a total reframing, because in the West, we're taught to think of individualism versus collectivism as a purely philosophical or political choice. It's about values.
We frame it as John Stuart Mill versus Confucius, liberty versus harmony.
Yeah. But you're saying it might not be about philosophy at all. It might be about epidemiology. It's just a pragmatic response to the local disease ecology.
And the data on this is really, really compelling. A group of researchers, Corey Fincher, Randy Thornhill, and their colleagues, did these huge cross-cultural studies. They basically created a global map of historical pathogen prevalence.
How do you even do that?
They looked at old epidemiological data, historical records, basically mapping out the historical hotspots for 9 major pathogens, things like typhus, leprosy, malaria, dengue fever. So now you have a map of where the world was historically sicker.
Okay.
Then they took a completely different set of data from cross-cultural psychology that measures things like individualism versus collectivism and the strength of family ties in different cultures.
And they laid one map on top of the other.
They did, and the correlation was, it was astonishingly strong. The higher the historical pathogen prevalence in a region, the more collectivist, traditional, and conformist the culture tended to be.
And the opposite was true as well.
The opposite was true. Regions with historically low pathogen loads, think colder, drier climates like Scandinavia or Northern Europe, were overwhelmingly the most individualistic, the most loose in their social norms.
Garrett, this feels like a classic correlation is not causation problem. Couldn't this just be about wealth?
So,
Well, wealthy countries tend to be in colder climates for a whole bunch of historical and geographic reasons. And wealthy countries can afford the luxury of individualism. You can follow your bliss when you have a strong social safety net and your basic needs are met. Maybe it's not the germs, it's just poverty that drives collectivism.
that's the first and most important critique, and they absolutely had to address it, so they ran the numbers again. But this time, they statistically controlled for things like GDP per capita, income inequality, climate, and even form of government.
And the link was still there.
The pathogen link remains strong and significant. Even when you compare, say, two countries with similar levels of economic development, the one with the higher historical disease burden tends to be more collectivist.
Me?
It seems to be an independent factor, and they've even found this pattern within large countries. In the United States, for example, states in the Deep South, which historically have higher rates of infectious disease, tend to score higher on measures of collectivism and social tightness than states in the Northwest.
Wow.
Gets even better. This whole mechanism has a name. It's called the behavioral immune system.
Okay, that sounds like a term I should know.
It's a psychological system. It's a set of instincts and emotional responses that evolve to be our first line of defense against disease before our physical immune system even has to get involved.
So it's about avoidance.
It's all about avoidance. It's the part of your brain that makes you feel a flicker of revulsion when someone coughs near you on the bus. It's the part that makes you wary of strange-looking food. It's a smoke detector for disease cues.
But the smoke detector can be a little oversensitive.
Very oversensitive.
Yeah.
It's designed to give false positives. It's better to be disgusted by 100 harmless things than to eat one poisonous thing.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The system isn't just triggered by actual signs of sickness, like a rash or a cough. It gets triggered by anything that is simply different from the norm.
A person with a different accent, a person who dresses differently.
A person with a physical disability, a foreigner. The behavioral immune system is neurologically lazy. It operates on a simple rule. Anything that isn't us is a potential source of contamination.
And in a high pathogen world, that's a rule that keeps you alive.
Us. But there's the huge trade-off. We've talked about the benefits, safety.
Yeah.
What's the cost of having this system constantly dialed up to 11?
Innovation, I guess. Openness. Creativity. All the things that come from deviance and experimentation.
Exactly. An individualistic culture with its lower pathogen stress can afford to be more open. It can tolerate more weirdos, and weirdos are where new ideas come from. But it's a high-risk, high-reward strategy. You get more innovation, but you're also more vulnerable to, well, new ideas that are bad or new germs that are deadly.
Whereas a collectivist culture is a low-risk, low-reward strategy. It prioritizes stability and safety over everything else.
It's conservative in the most literal sense of the word. It wants to conserve the traditions that have been proven to work.
Right.
This is what's sometimes called the traditional norms account. The idea that traditions, even ones that seem completely arbitrary to an outsider,
Like bowing instead of shaking hands.
are actually highly functional. They are elegant solutions to ecological problems that we might have forgotten even existed.
So is this all just cultural learning? Or is there a deeper genetic layer to this? Does the environment actually shape our DNA?
Question. And the science here is newer and a bit more controversial. But there are some fascinating clues. One involves a gene called 5-HTT-LRP.
Full.
It's the serotonin transporter gene. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that's heavily involved in mood, anxiety, and social behavior.
The happy chemical.
That's a bit of an oversimplification, but yeah, it's in that ballpark. Now, this gene comes in a couple of different flavors or alleles. There's a long allele and a short allele. And the short allele is associated with, well, with being a bit more neurotic.
Neurotic.
People with the short allele tend to have higher baseline anxiety. They're more sensitive to negative emotional cues, and they have a stronger stress response.
That sounds like a disadvantage. Why would evolution keep a worrywart gene around?
Because in a dangerous environment, being a worrywart is a really good idea. If you're living in a world full of invisible threats, you want to be hypervigilant. You want to be jumpy. You want to be extremely sensitive to social disapproval, because getting kicked out of the tribe is a death sentence.
Caution is an advantage.
A massive advantage. And here's the punchline. Some large-scale genetic studies have found that the frequency of this anxious short allele is significantly higher in populations from historically high pathogen collectivist cultures.
So the environment might not just be shaping the culture, it might be actively selecting for a certain genetic profile within the population.
That's the hypothesis. It's a gene-culture co-evolutionary feedback loop. The disease environment creates a collectivist culture. That culture favors cautious and conformist individuals, and so the genes associated with caution and conformity become more common in the population.
So the people are not just taught to be cautious, they might be genetically predisposed to be cautious.
Actually. Now, I have to throw in a big caveat here.
Okay.
The genetics of personality are ridiculously complex. We're not talking about a single collectivism gene. This 5-HTTLRP finding is just one piece of a giant puzzle, and some larger meta-analyses have found mixed or null results. It's not a settled science.
But the general idea is still on the table.
The general idea is very much on the table. And it's not just pathogens. Other theories look at things like rice versus wheat farming or climate harshness. Rice farming, for example, requires huge communal irrigation projects, which might select for more collectivist traits than wheat farming, which can be done by a single family. The point is, these are all outside-in forces. The environment is the sculptor and we are the clay.
Okay, but it still feels a little incomplete because I don't feel like clay. I feel like I'm making active choices. You know, I chose to live here. I chose my career. I didn't just passively accept my environment.
Right, you didn't. Which brings us perfectly to the second big idea for today. We've talked about the outside-in perspective. Let's talk about the inside-out force, where our genes aren't just reacting to the world, they're actively trying to build a world that suits them.
This is gene-environment correlation.
Exactly. And the story of Clara is the perfect illustration of this.
Right. So Clara, she's born into a multi-generational farming community in the American Midwest.
So think about that in the context of what we just discussed. A farming community is, by necessity, a relatively tight culture.
Right. High on the personality trait of conscientiousness. You need order, duty, predictability. The cows need to be milked at the same time every day. You have to plan for the seasons. It's all about routine.
Routine is survival.
Yeah.
But Clara was born with a personality that was, for whatever genetic reason, extremely high in another of the big 5 traits, openness to experience.
Which is sort of the opposite of conscientiousness.
Yes. High openness means you crave novelty. You're drawn to art, to abstract ideas, to new kinds of food, to chaos. You want stimulation.
So while everyone else in her family found deep comfort and meaning in the predictable rhythm of the farm, Clara felt caged. She described it as feeling like a biological anomaly, like she was just fundamentally wrong.
That feeling of wrongness is the key, the biological signal. It's her genotype screaming that it's in the wrong environment. It's like a polar bear finding itself in the Sahara. It's just not built for the climate.
Ew.
As soon as she turned 18, she left. And she didn't just move to a slightly bigger town, she moved to Berlin. Specifically to a neighborhood known for being a chaotic hub for artists, musicians, and tech startups.
The polar opposite of our home.
That's it. And she said the feeling of relief was instantaneous. It wasn't just that she enjoyed the city. She said it was the first time in her life her brain felt quiet. It felt at home in the noise and the novelty.
So from the outside, this just looks like a classic story of a small town kid finding herself in the big city. But you're saying something deeper was going on.
Much deeper. The theory of active gene-environment correlation, or niche picking, would say that Clara didn't just randomly find herself in Berlin. Her genetic blueprint was actively driving her, pushing her to seek out a high-stimulus, high-openness environment where her traits would be an asset instead of a liability.
She was picking her niche.
She was picking her niche. This idea comes from the work of Sandra Scar and Kathleen McCartney, who argued that nature versus nurture is the wrong way to think about it. It's not a battle, it's a collaboration. And it happens in 3 distinct ways over a person's lifespan.
Yeah.
The first is called passive correlation. This is what happens when you're a baby and a young child. You don't choose anything. You just passively receive both genes and environment from your parents.
Give me an example.
Okay. Let's say you have parents who are both naturally gifted musicians. They have the genes for perfect pitch, rhythm, fine motor control. First, they pass those genes on to you.
Nature.
But because they are musical people, what is their house going to be like?
Full of instruments. Music is always playing. They're singing to you in the crib.
Exactly. So you, the child, get a double dose. You get the musical genes, and you get a musically rich environment. And you didn't have to do anything to get it. It was passively provided for you.
That sense.
Fascinating. It's called evocative correlation. This is where your genetically influenced traits evoke or draw out specific responses from the world around you.
So it's not what's in the house, but how people react to me.
Let's take 2 babies. Baby A is, by genetic temperament, very easygoing. Smiley, calm, doesn't cry much. Baby B is genetically predisposed to be more irritable, colicky, difficult to soothe.
Okay.
What happens when you, as an adult, interact with baby A?
You smile back, you pick them up, you coo at them, you play with them.
You shower them with social and verbal stimulation. Now, what about baby B?
Well, you still take care of them, you feed them and change them, but you're probably more stressed. You might spend less time just playing because it's not as rewarding. They're constantly crying.
So even with the exact same parents in the exact same house, baby A grows up in an environment that is rich with warmth, interaction, and language. Baby B grows up in an environment that is more stressed and distant. Their genes have literally created two different worlds for them to live in.
That's huge, because it means we're not just passive recipients of the world. We are actively training the people around us how to treat us right from birth.
And we never stop. An agreeable, friendly person evokes agreeableness and friendliness from others. A hostile, argumentative person evokes hostility. Then they look around and say, why is everyone always so hostile? They don't realize they are the common denominator. They are creating their own social weather.
And the third type is active correlation. That's Clara.
That's Clara. This is niche picking. As we get older, we gain more autonomy. We're no longer stuck in the environment our parents created. We start to make our own choices.
We choose our friends, our hobbies, our college major, our career.
Our city, our romantic partner. And the theory says that we tend to choose people, places, and things that fit our genotype. An extrovert doesn't force themselves to become a librarian. They go into event planning. A person high in conscientiousness doesn't join a punk band. They become an accountant. We build a world that fits us.
This explains something that I've always wondered about. Why does it seem like people's personalities get more pronounced as they get older? Like my friends from high school are now just more extreme versions of who they were then.
And it's so counterintuitive. In most biological traits, the influence of genetics, what we call heritability, tends to decrease over time as life experiences pile up.
Right. Nurture takes over.
But with personality, it's the reverse. The heritability of personality traits increases from childhood to adulthood because of niche picking. When you're a kid, you're in a very standardized environment. You're stuck in school. You're stuck in your family. Your genes might be begging for a different world, but you have no choice. So the environment is suppressing or diluting your genetic tendencies.
But when you're an adult?
By the time you're 40, you have had 20 years to build a fortress around your personality. You have a job that fits you, a spouse who understands you, friends who share your values, a hobby that plays to your strengths. You've built a custom-made bunker. So the environment is no longer diluting your genes, it's amplifying them.
So we get better at creating a life that reinforces who we already are.
Yes. And this is why personality tends to stabilize around age 30. It's not that our biology magically solidifies. It's that we've finished the major construction phase of our niche. We've found our bunker, and we're settling in.
Is there a best personality, though, evolutionarily speaking? I mean, we generally think it's better to be smart than not smart. Is it better to be agreeable than disagreeable?
This is a fantastic question. No. This is where the work of evolutionary psychologists like Lars Pankey and Marcus Jokela comes in. They make a crucial distinction between intelligence and personality. Intelligence seems to be under what's called directional selection. For most of human history, in most environments, being smarter was just better. It helped you solve problems and survive. So evolution pushed in one direction, towards more robust cognitive ability.
But personality is different.
Personality seems to be under balancing selection. There is no single best personality profile that works in all situations. The ideal trait profile depends entirely on the specific ecological or social niche.
Give me an example.
Is it better to be a bold, risk-taking extrovert or a cautious, diligent introvert?
Depends. If you're trying to explore a new continent, being bold is probably an advantage. If you're trying to survive a famine, being cautious and conserving energy is probably better.
If there's a pandemic, being an introvert who enjoys staying home is a massive survival advantage. If the economy is booming, being an extrovert who networks constantly might lead to more success. Because the environment is always changing, evolution kept all the personality types in the toolkit. It never put all its eggs in one basket.
So we're like a diversified stock portfolio as a species. We have some high-risk, high-growth extroverts and some stable, low-yield introverts.
Each trait is a specialist waiting for the right market conditions to pay off.
This is all making so much sense. Okay, let's move to the third and final piece of this puzzle. We've done germs shaping us from the outside in and genes shaping our world from the inside out. But how do we get to the really visceral part?
The yuck factor.
Yes, disgust. It goes back to that feeling from the opening story. That recoil my cousin had. It wasn't an intellectual disagreement, it was physical.
And the theory behind this is one of the most elegant in modern psychology. It's the idea of serial homology.
Right. Homology is about shared ancestry of structures, right? Like the bone structure in a whale's flipper is homologous to the bones in a human hand.
Exactly. They look different and do different things, but they're built from the same ancestral parts. The key insight here is that evolution is a tinkerer, not an engineer. It doesn't design new systems from scratch. When a new adaptive problem arises, it grabs an old existing tool and modifies it for a new purpose.
It's lazy.
It's efficient. So when it comes to disgust, what was the original problem, the original tool?
Don't eat poison. Don't eat things that will make you sick.
Yes, the absolute most basic survival problem, the original disgust system. What researchers like Tybur, Fessler, and Rosen call domain 1 is pathogen disgust. It's the ancient software in your brainstem that triggers a powerful physical revulsion to the smell of rotting meat, the sight of feces, an infected wound.
The gag reflex, the curled lip, the wrinkled nose.
It's a keep-out signal for your body. Its only job is to protect you from contamination. But then, as humans evolved and became more complex, new problems arose. For example, the problem of finding a good mate. Specifically, the problem of avoiding bad mates. Mating with close kin, for example, leads to a higher risk of genetic defects in offspring. So evolution needed a way to prevent incest.
How did it solve it?
It didn't invent a whole new complex moral reasoning system, it just tinkered. It grabbed the old don't eat rotten meat circuit and hotwired it to the concept of sleeping with your sibling. This is domain 2, sexual disgust.
So the reason the idea of incest feels so deeply repulsive, so physically sickening, is because it's running on the same neural hardware as our reaction to spoiled food.
It feels like the same core emotion because, in a way, it is. It's a repurposing of the contamination reflex.
Okay, but the next leap is even bigger. How do we get from sex and food to politics, religion, and social rules?
This is the final update, domain 3, moral disgust. As human societies got larger and more complex, we faced a new, massive problem. How to enforce cooperation? How do you stop people from cheating, stealing, lying, and freeloading?
You create laws and punishments.
Sure enough. You need something more powerful, more automatic. You need people to feel, on a gut level, that breaking the rules is wrong. So evolution tinkered one more time. It took that same disgust circuit and applied it to abstract social violations.
This is where the story of Elias in the Andes comes in.
Example, Elias is a traveler. He's trying to be generous and build rapport with a village elder. So he offers the elder a swig of a fermented drink that he brought with him. In Elias's culture, this drink is a sign of friendship.
But in the elder's culture, it's a taboo.
A major taboo. And the elder's reaction wasn't, "No, thank you, that is against the customs of my people." Elias said the man physically recoiled, his nose wrinkled, his upper lip curled into that classic disgust sneer. He gagged.
He reacted as if Elias had handed him a piece of rotting meat.
Because in his brain, the two things were the same. The taboo violation was processed as a physical contagion. The drink, and by extension Elias himself, were seen as impure, as contaminating.
We do this with language all the time without even thinking about it. We call a corrupt politician slimy. A betrayal is sickening. A cheater is a dirty rat.
We think we're speaking in metaphors, but we're not. We are giving a literal, neurological description of what is happening. When you witness a profound moral violation, your brain activates the insular cortex, the exact same region that lights up when you're exposed to a disgusting smell.
And this explains why it's so hard to argue with people about their deepest moral convictions.
It's impossible.
You're bringing facts and logic, and they're fighting the urge to vomit.
You're trying to have a debate, and they're having a visceral physiological reaction. This moral disgust is an incredibly powerful tool for social cohesion. It's the social glue that binds a tribe together. It makes the group's rules feel sacred and makes breaking them feel physically repulsive.
But it has an incredibly dark side, doesn't it?
A profoundly dark side, because if I don't just see you as someone I disagree with, but as someone who is disgusting or unclean...
You're no longer a person, you're a pathogen, a virus, a source of contamination.
And what do you do with contamination? You don't debate it. You don't reason with it. You cleanse it. You purge it. You eradicate it.
This is the psychological mechanism of dehumanization?
If you look at the propaganda leading up to almost every major atrocity in human history, it always uses the language of disgust. The target group is described as vermin, cockroaches, a disease, a cancer. It's a deliberate strategy to hack the behavioral immune system of the population, to turn off empathy and turn on the pathogen purging instinct.
And this brings us right into the modern day. I mean, we can't have this entire conversation about germs, tribes, and disgust without talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. It felt like a global, real-time stress test for all of these theories.
It absolutely was. It
Yeah.
was like someone flipped a switch and activated the behavioral immune system for the entire planet simultaneously, and the results were complex.
Because according to the parasite stress theory we started with, you'd make a clear prediction, right?
Good. The prediction would be that the people who score highest on traditionalism, the ones who value purity, order, and conformity, should have been the most freaked out by the virus and the most compliant with safety measures like masks and lockdowns.
They should have the most sensitive smoke detector for disease. They should have been the first ones to scream, "Protect the tribe from the contagion."
And in many cultures around the world, that's more or less what happened. In many East Asian countries, for example, which are broadly more collectivist and traditional, there was very high social compliance with public health measures. The threat was a virus, and the traditional response, tighten the group, follows the rules kicked in.
But not in the United States. In the US, it was largely the opposite. It was political conservatives, the traditionalists, who were often the most resistant to masks and mandates. Why did the model seem to break down there?
It didn't break down so much as it collided with another equally powerful sacred value. The model assumes the primary threat is perceived as the pathogen. But in the US cultural context, another ancient value is liberty or autonomy. For a specific segment of the population, that value is just as sacred as purity.
So their disgust circuits were still firing.
Oh, they're firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
But they weren't being triggered by the virus. They were being triggered by the mandate. The government telling them what to do was perceived as the contaminating force.
It was a pollution of their individual liberty.
Exactly. They felt the same physical revulsion towards a mask mandate that the Andean elder felt toward the taboo drink. It wasn't a logical argument about epidemiological statistics. It was a gut-level reaction against a perceived violation of a sacred tribal norm.
So we had two tribes living in the same country whose disgust systems were aimed at two completely different targets. One aimed at the virus, the other aimed at the government.
And both were utterly convinced that they were fighting to cleanse the world of a dangerous contaminant. It just goes to show that these ancient biological systems are still running the show, even when we think we're having a sophisticated modern political debate.
Man, this has been a journey. To think we started with a bowl of puffed rice and kolkata, trying to understand why one person's food is another person's friend.
And from there, we saw how invisible pathogens might have literally designed our social structures and our political leanings.
Then we watched Clara, whose genes acted like a compass, pulling her across the world to a city that matched her brain's frequency.
And we ended up realizing that our deepest sense of moral outrage might just be a clever repurposing of our instinct to avoid spoiled food.
It completely dismantles the idea of the self as this solid, rational, independent thing.
Yes. We want to believe we're the captain of our own ship, calmly steering with the map of logic. But this body of research suggests we're more like the ship itself, carved from the wood of our environment, powered by the ancient winds of evolution, and navigating by the stars our ancestors used.
It takes me all the way back to that question from when I was 10. If I had stayed in that village, would I still be me? And the answer, based on everything we've talked about, seems to be an undeniable no.
You would be a different person. Same hardware, maybe, but running a completely different operating system. The you that you experience every day is a joint venture between your biology and your biography.
And maybe if you can really internalize that, if you can see that your own deepest truths are, in many ways, an accident of your birth, it becomes a little harder to hate someone whose accidents were different from yours.
A little bit of biological humility.
We spend so much of our lives convinced that our moral compass is a product of pure logic and that our personality is a unique artistic creation. But when you realize that so much of yourself, from your politics to who you love to your visceral reaction to a stranger, is actually an ancient biological code just trying to keep you safe from a virus that existed 10,000 years ago, it makes you realize how little of the driver's seat you actually occupy. If you could strip away the survival instincts of your ancestors, the person left behind the wheel might be a complete stranger to you.
We are truly ancient creatures, trying our best to make sense of a modern world with a brain that was built for a very different one.
Fascinating. We'll see you in the next one.